I like beginnings. Beginnings are filled with potential. Every story has a beginning. I love the first page of a book. Don't always like the end. Every song has a beginning. I like the beginnings of stories. I like the beginnings of talks like this. Even when they begin right after lunch and everybody's a little logy. Hopefully Chris Cardos did something to ease that up. And we even have cultural stories about beginnings. Cultural stories like the Garden of Eden. So take a minute and just imagine ourselves there for a moment. The imagery is just beautiful. Just picture a lush tropical paradise in the cradle of civilization. All creatures living together peacefully. Everything brimming with life and potential. Every need anticipated and provided for. Seriously, like some all-inclusive resort. And it's a couples resort. We've got the man. We've got the woman. We've got the clothing optional beach. And only one rule. One rule. No apples. What could possibly go wrong? But it's a good case in point. We never know how things will turn out. Our ideals eventually have to meet the real world. It's one thing to like an idea at its beginning when it's pure and it has all this potential. It's another to maintain our ideals when they're tested. Values are like this. They exist in potentia. They're a concept or a possibility. How many of you have ever gone to a meeting, it's usually off-site, half-day off-site meeting with leadership to determine what your mission statement will be or what your corporate values are? Anybody out there? There's a few. So you've sat around that long table with a bunch of your peers, had a bunch of 8x10 index cards with words written on them, things like integrity and collaboration and excellence. And people get like real into it when it's just philosophical and they start like arguing about the finer points between honesty and integrity or teamwork and collaboration. They want to make sure like they got the right thing to nail what their values are. Come back with something that we've all agreed upon. And at that point, we can name our values, our organizational values. We can point to them, we can brag about them, we can market them. But they're only conceptual until we actually stand by them. Did you know that 60% of organizations list some type of core values on their websites? But saying you have core values because you've posted them, it's like saying you're in shape because you bought the gym membership. We've all seen companies who advertise their values but really don't stand by them. And when we fail to uphold our values, the vibrant possibilities that they had really become little more than beautiful but empty words. A collection, pinned in place, on a wall, on a mission statement, on our website. So today, I'm going to talk about values at the moment of decision. That moment when we are the only thing that determines whether our values will grow stronger, define us, or fade into irrelevance. Because each time we're forced to choose between our desires and our values, we really stand at a crossroads. I'll give you an example. I found myself at a crossroads once. In my professional life, I'm a strategist, an analyst. But in my personal life, I'm many other things. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a bit of a geek. I'm a man fascinated with history, cryptology, and mysteries. I'm also an adult living with a form of autism. As many of you know, I have Asperger's syndrome. And one common aspect of Asperger's is a thing called special interests. Special interests are a lot like a hobby on steroids, a little bit closer to an obsession. They often have a personal intensity not shared by our peers. There aren't many folks my age who are really, really, really into pirates. But they are the best of people. These special interests, they inspire us. They drive us to incredible levels of effort and at times performance. But they can also take their toll. 10 years ago, I developed a new special interest. I became fascinated with an unsolved cipher known as the Shepherd's Monument inscription. It's on many short lists of unsolved ciphers and historical mysteries. It was created in the 18th century by an English gentleman named Thomas Anson. And it's been the subject of both rational conjecture and crazy radical conspiracy theories for generations. It consists of 8 letters etched into marble on a mysterious garden monument. Thomas Anson, the designer, was often found in his garden, meditating over them with serious intent. But he would never explain what they meant. And when he died, the mystery was left to posterity. Well, it drew me in. I became obsessed with the subject, and I began to write a book about it. I threw myself into my work. It filled all my thoughts. For years, I stayed up until 2 a.m. reading. I corresponded with libraries, with museums, and with experts from around the world. And I found that Thomas Anson had his own special interests. Things like Egyptian culture, Greek mystery schools. I felt that I truly needed to understand him to understand his motivation. So I dove into the arcane world of Western mysticism. It drew me in, became all-engrossing. And as the book progressed and my research grew wider, I lost myself in my special interest. I wandered further and further into a labyrinth of possibilities. I spent less time focused on my family. And even when I was with them, my mind was elsewhere. I think probably some of you in this room have felt that way at times, or maybe realized it after the fact. At one point, on the wildest of my tangents, my study brought me here to Rhode Island, to a 19th century industrialist and spiritualist, fueled by dreams in which an ancient druid came to him. He built a magnificent oceanside estate named Hazard Castle. I became determined to visit it, come hell or high water. Well, this is Hazard Castle. And though I'm shy by nature, it was calling me. I was terrified of sneaking onto the grounds. You see, over the years, it had become a Catholic retreat center, and it was now guarded by an elite corps of nuns. They dressed in black, just like ninjas. But one day, I screwed up my courage, and I turned my minivan up the long driveway to Hazard Castle. Well, you should know, before I go any further up the driveway here, my minivan had over 200,000 miles on it, and it had developed noises appropriate to its age. So as I drove up that long tree-lined driveway, I announced my presence to every devout Catholic on the estate. the nuns came out to see who was coming for a visit. Suddenly mortified and shamed by the attention, I turned around in the driveway. I waved happily, pretended I was lost, and beat a hasty retreat back down and out. The sheer ridiculousness of this moment woke me up. I mean, come on. Was I really waving to nuns as I fled the grounds of a mystic castle in Narragansett? Had I become this engrossed in a world of cryptic puzzles and mystical quests? Looking around me, I had an epiphany. I woke up and I found myself at that crossroads. Because, as I've said, I'm a husband and a father of 4. My eldest was on the autism spectrum like me, and he was struggling in school and in life. My wife needed a fully engaged husband and a partner in navigating these waters. And it was now that I realized that although I valued this mystic quest, deep in my psyche, my devotion to my family was even more of a priority to me. My ideal was not some cryptic secret hidden away in some tower. It was right in my home. I took a long last look at Hazard Castle, and though it took all of my resolve to do so, I put it aside. The book, the mysteries, everything. I'm both embarrassed and proud to be able to tell this story. I'm embarrassed because it is clearly a story of weakness and lunacy. I admit that. You can whisper about me on the next break. But it's also a story of strength in decision, and that has made all the difference. Without really thinking about it, I was going through a values exercise. I was prioritizing what was most important to me. When we make difficult decisions, it strengthens the values that win out. That power can impel some surprising transformations, both in our personal lives and in our organizations. My life now turned onto a new path. I became focused on learning more about autism, about mine and my son's, and on the educational needs of children on the spectrum. My wife, Laura, and I, we worked together. She by far surpassed me in her knowledge, ultimately becoming a special ed parents advocate. She's here with us today. But together, we focused on ensuring that our son received the education that he needed. We went to a lot of IEP meetings. If you've been to one, you know. We fought a lot of battles with the system, and we researched many, many schools. Once, we heard of a school that had an outstanding reputation for years, but it had failed a test of its values. Established in the 60s, the Pine Ridge School thrived for half a century in upstate Vermont. But some years ago, their board of directors became convinced that they needed to change directions. They decided to shift their focus from their educational programs towards financial success. They reprioritized their values. To do this, they replaced their head of school with a new person more focused on the numbers. And then they began to cut costs by trimming staff. As a result, many families began to leave the school. They had more layoffs to control costs. And as more staff left, more families left. This cycle continued, and within 2 years, an organization that had thrived for almost 50 now closed its doors for good. The leaders at Pine Ridge had made a dramatic change in their core values. When those values changed, people not only questioned the value of the education the school provided, but they lost a desire to be a part of it. They opted out. Pine Ridge is really a cautionary tale, and it's a great example of the importance of organizational values. Well, Laura and I, we became familiar with just about every program in the region. We became exasperated when we couldn't find any schools that were a perfect fit for our son's needs. The process took a long time. And then one day a consultant sent us a name, the Middlebridge School. We had never heard of it, but we learned that the story of the Middlebridge School was the polar opposite of the Pine Ridge tale. Middlebridge was, in fact, started by a man named John Kaufman and 12 educators who had left Pine Ridge. Together, they picked up their lives and moved 300 miles from the Green Mountains of Vermont here to Rhode Island to work with a community of families to found a new school. Why did they decide to make such a drastic move? Because they shared a vision, a purpose, and some fundamental values. Their vision was to build a school that would help kids transform from good to great. Their purpose was not to make money. Their purpose was to prepare these kids for success in adult life. And they shared some core ideas about how to do this. These were their values, their guiding principles. First, they believed that instruction needed to be tailored to the individual. They also believed that they needed to develop strong interpersonal relationships with their students in order to reach them. And finally, they believed in the need for a supportive community, a community made up of students, of educators, and of parents working together. These were their values, the guiding principles on how to do this right. Because you see, the educators at the Middlebridge School understood that learning differences can lead to a crippling lack of confidence in students. I'd like us all to just kind of think about that for a moment. How do we build confidence in students that have always been defined by their disability? Always had teachers point out, with good intention, where they struggle. Often been on the outside of peer groups. Been labeled as different, picked last in gym, stayed home from prom. We start by elevating the individual. We make relationships and community the founding values of our organization. Because relationships build trust, and with community comes belonging. And then suddenly confidence begins to emerge. And when confidence emerges, the whole world changes. We take risks, we get out of our comfort zones, and we begin to grow by leaps and bounds. Now, I could fill you with stories of the sacrifices the staff made in establishing this school, but I'd rather just tell you just one story of a shy student who came to the school with a special interest. He was intrigued by sound and light systems, stage lighting, like we have here today. Now, Middlebridge didn't even have a theater, let alone a light system. But the dean of students, Dan Leventhal, he saw the boy's passion, and he decided to turn it into a teaching moment. The dean gave the boy a project. He had him spec out all of the necessary gear. And then, to improve social skills, he had him interact with contractors, had him get competitive bids from multiple sources. I think many of you folks know what that's like. He went through the vendor selection process. He handled delivery, payment, had to go to finance to get a check cut. And he configured the lighting board himself. That spring, for the first time ever, the school had a sound and lights production with their spring play. That student won kudos from his peers. He felt valued in the community, and he thrived. They could have ignored this opportunity. There were plenty of reasons to. But they stayed true to their values. They understood him as an individual, they built a relationship with him, and they connected him with the rest of the community. They focused on this boy's potential, and he rose to the occasion. Every kid in this picture has a story like that. Different, but the same. This is a picture of all the students that year, every single one, dressed up on the night of their prom. The sound and lights man is here in this picture, but it really doesn't matter which one he is, because they're all incredible. Look at those smiles. Besides, I know which one he is. He's my son. You remember the castle that I abandoned so many years ago? It was a decision point in my life. I had to decide what I valued most, and I chose my family over my obsession. I will never regret that decision. I chose a path, and it led me to where I and my family are today, in a much better place in so many ways. But the path I chose also surprised me, because it led me to a better understanding of myself. It led me to a time when I could complete that book while maintaining balance in my life. My wife and my kids supported me. It was a great project. And finally, the path I chose also brought me back to Hazard Castle. In fact, I go there quite often now, because Hazard Castle is the new home of the Middlebridge School. Sometimes, making the right decision can be hard. It may even appear to hinder us in our quest, but when we stay true to our values, they can produce miraculous, even mystifying results. If I and the staff at Middlebridge had not made decisions upholding our core values, we may never have arrived at this place together. Our guide at the crossroads was no map. It was the compass of our values. The destination, that was serendipity. If you take one thing away from this today, remember, our strongest values are the ones that survive the millions of decisions we make in our lifetimes. Each time we're forced to choose between our desires and our values, we stand at a crossroads. Be in the moment at your next crossroads. Make your decisions count, and let your values fulfill your potential. Thank you.